Maschler. Can you hear me here? Yeah. My name is Thomas Maschler. I'm working for the World Resources Institute and the Global Forest Watch Initiative on African forests. And WI is mostly working on big mapping platforms, like visualizing and analyzing big spatial data. But today I want to talk about logging roads and our logging road initiative, which we launched together with our partner Moabi today here at the summit. This is when you have to clap now. So I guess like everyone is asking, okay, like there's a big disaster in Nepal right now, like why the heck like should we bother about logging roads? But in fact it's actually like also a disaster, although like a creeping disaster. Next slide. So this is normally an animated GIF, so you see how the logging roads are spreading across the forest. So like in the last 15 years in the Congo Basin, like we lost about 10 million hectares of intact forests. For those like who don't know what intact forest means, like these are intact forests are forests which have never been touched by humans, and as soon as we see any evidence of human activity, they become disturbed. So 10 million hectares, this is about 10% of the remaining intact forests in the Congo Basin. Next. And what this means is like we build roads into the forest and we give access to poachers, mostly like ivory poachers who kill elephants. Like within the last 15 years or like about in the same time period, we lost about 62% of the elephant population in the Congo Basin. And they also lost about 30% of their national range, which is a disaster. So if we look at the current status, most of the elephants live in the remaining intact forests. So this map here shows the elephant range in like this beige and dark brown colors. Like if it's getting darker, like this is like the high density of elephants. And the hash lines, these are the remaining intact forests. And you see like there's a strong correlation about the areas where the intact forests and the elephants. Next. So at the same time, there are active logging concessions, and there are 20 million hectares of active logging concessions inside the intact forest. This means that like within the next 10 to 15 years, that this 20 million hectares will become disturbed. And most of these areas are also like overlapping with the elephant habitat. So like we can assume there are going to be more roads, there are going to be more people in the forest, and there are going to be less elephants. So why do we want to map these roads, right? Like WI is working with other partners on the ground in the different countries. We work closely with park agencies, park rangers, who do the patrols, and knowing where the roads are means that we know like where the poachers are, and it means like that we can track down illegal activities, and we can do better patrol planning, right? But at the same time, we can also identify the areas which are not disturbed yet, and we can advocate for better land use planning to avoid the first cut. This is actually like what we really want. We don't want to be responsive, we want to be proactive about it. So we have to know where these roads are to identify the remaining intact forest, so that we can speak with the responsible people and like advocate for leaving these areas uncut. Right. So over the last 15 years, WI already started like mapping forest roads, but we realized that they were kind of really closed, like they weren't accessible to the public. So everything which is black here are roads which are currently in OpenStreetMap, and everything which is like in this greenish color are the logging roads which we mapped and which hasn't been disclosed yet. So we decided like that we want to import these roads into OpenStreetMap to make them more accessible. And then also we want to start using OpenStreetMap as a platform to manage our road data. So the problem is like WI is heavily sponsored by Esri, and this doesn't go well together. So like no one of us actually had a clue like how to work with OpenStreetMap. But luckily, we found a partner with Moabi, who are working in the same region and have kind of like the same objectives as us, and are also based here in DC. And last year, actually like exactly 1 year ago, there was an eco-hack in New York, and we pitched this idea, okay, like let's try to import our logging roads into OpenStreetMap and manage them there. And started to become a project. And with the expertise of Moabi, we developed a platform and workflows to manage these data. So this is where I pass the floor on to James from Moabi, who's going to talk a bit more of our tools which we developed and how we're going to plan to manage everything. Thank you.
All right. Let's get this booted up. Up and down. Left and right might work also. Great. So, my name's James. I've been working with Leo Bottrell over here for about a year and a half on the Moabi project. And I guess, roughly speaking, we've been looking at ways to use OpenStreetMap for non-OpenStreetMap data types, particularly environmental data. So basically, can we use the data model that has been developed over the last 10 years for roads and bridges and buildings and whatnot? Can we use those to manage data on mining contracts, on logging contracts, on elephant habitat, et cetera?
I don't know where it is.
If you slide so that's broadly what we've been doing, and then this became a very specific project trying to implement this with WRI, looking at logging roads in particular. So the project that Tomas gave a brief background on, upload to OSM all logging roads in an area roughly the size of Western Europe. I think I was mostly eyeballing it last night, but it looked about the same. Number of nodes, there's 650,000 nodes to upload. So it's a huge area. There's a lot of data. There's a stat on the number of ways, but it got cut off. It's a lot, it's like 60,000 or something. So it's a really large data set, and the idea was to make it as open and accessible and easily maintainable as possible going forward, which obviously is exactly what HOT is built around. Next slide. So the goals, improve the data, make it open and accessible. Both of those are probably pretty familiar to everybody here, but also some other pieces. Analyze change over time, because obviously logging roads, this is a dynamic data set. There are new ones cut every year. They get abandoned, some get abandoned in certain years, and so it requires constant monitoring. It is not a static data set. Also, another goal was to engage the environmental and geographic communities. These are two different communities, or they're a collection of different communities. There's some overlap, but they're different enough that there were some interesting approaches to kind of appeal to both. And also specifically build out a new toolkit to manage a specific data set like this. So the first two are pretty simple, so I'll skip over them. If anyone has questions about the open part and the data part and whatnot, I can talk about that afterwards, but that's pretty familiar, I think, to most everybody here. So next slide. Just talking about change over time. It's actually the same GIF that Tomas used, but yeah, it's a really interesting problem, also, both from a human standpoint, but also from a data standpoint, because it is so visually identifiable with satellite imagery. So you can see, this is just a GIF from a satellite imagery for many years, and you can, if the resolution is high enough, you can literally see it spread over a massive territory within only, I think this is only six years. So it was kind of this perfect problem that needed to be addressed soon, but also had a very doable solution to it. This is data that is like eminently measurable. Next slide. So also, yeah, particularly of interest to the people here, I think, is this idea of engagement. Engagement with HOT and OSM, that was, if anything, kind of the easy thing, because it is a community built around engagement. So this was, all of this work has been done through the tasking manager. We still have projects up on the tasking manager that anyone can contribute to if they're interested. That, if anything, was the simple part. The hard part is basically taking the OSM and HOT data management approach and applying that to different circumstances. In this case, the environmental world. And so, the question that we had to confront early on was, what does the HOT OSM toolkit look like when used outside of the HOT OSM world? Or rather, when we expand the HOT OSM world to, kind of new domains. Next slide. And yeah, what we found, OSM and HOT have a really good, solid approach to generalized, distributed, crowdsourced data management. It works. It's why everyone's meeting here. It's why the community is growing, and the database is growing incredibly quickly. Most organizations, however, have a completely different approach to data. Both of these should be pretty familiar. Most organizations have a very specialized closed data model. They might make the data available, call it open data, and it is open data, it's downloadable, and they're very transparent about their methodologies, but when it comes to managing that data set, they're using, and we, and probably many people in this room, you work in small teams locally on, or maybe on a local area network, sharing files, and you're talking, over IRC or maybe just in person. It's closed and it's not distributed and it's localized, and there are good reasons for this, really. Next slide. I'm not saying that this is a bad or even like old-fashioned approach. There are obvious reasons why you don't want to open your data set. There are operational reasons, there are security reasons. Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is that you don't want people messing with your data if they don't know what they're doing. Everybody, whenever I kind of present this idea to non-OSM people, the biggest thing that they talk about is vandalism. When I try to tell them, at least this is, if anyone has, greater perspective on this, please share, but like vandalism is not the #1 issue. It is unintentional damage to the data set, and that is a real concern. And I then go on to explain that OSM has very good tools to track changes to data, that it's a versioned database, so you are not overwriting data, you can't really lose data, but even still, it is a different approach, and there are reasons why people would be hesitant to adopt an OpenStreetMap or HOT approach to an organizational database. So opening your data is kind of a common, there's a lot of good thinking about that. Plenty of people open their data, but they don't open their data management because there are real operational difficulties to doing that. Next slide. So what I wanted to do was take what we wanted to do, and we're still working on doing, and this is just the beginning. We have some ideas. We have some prototypes. This project is a great prototype, but love to share ideas. Bring the OSM model into organizations looking at building specialized workflows around OpenStreetMap and HOT's generalized tools. And so I think this requires kind of tailoring a lot of these really powerful tools that we have around very specific use cases where we really understand the workflow involved, and don't try to hit the 85% use case. Try to hit the 5 or 10% use case. Next slide. So just quickly, the toolkit that we came up with, this is just, eventually your project grows and you start throwing a lot of different pieces together. It's pretty modular, and I think that's a good thing. It's almost everything that we used are other people's tools, many of them built by people in this room. And then we kind of we built a small, basically just front-end only website that at least began to knit all of these tools together. But there is OpenStreetMap and Hot, because it is modular, because there are a lot of these little tools that are great standalone but also work well with each other, is that you really can kind of build your own, I want to say Frankenstein, but it's like a good thing, that you can just assemble this. It's like Legos. You start building pieces together and you swap things out when something stops doing exactly what you want it to do. But you can build actually incredibly quickly, because right at your fingertips you have open source tools that you can redeploy really quickly. Next slide. So roughly speaking, we started with a Jekyll front-end site. Jekyll is a static site generator. It's really easy to build quick websites that are static, so they're served really quickly. It's really easy to host them. That was kind of the core piece of our custom mesh that we were knitting all these pieces together. Overpass was also key, because we wanted to run analytics on the data set as it was updated. And Overpass is a strong enough API that you can hit it multiple times a day without pissing off the people who are maintaining it. OSN History is a new tool that tracks change sets, and that's key because one of our goals was to provide feedback to users on the data that they're contributing. The tasking manager, of course, it's huge and was like a key piece of this, and ID. Also, walkthroughs. I think the walkthrough in ID is like one of the better tutorials out there, because it is not a bunch of screenshots with text. It actually is the application showing you how to use it. It's also, because of that, it's a lot harder to build. So when I say TBD, we did not do anything with that yet, but that's kind of one of my thoughts for the next piece. So jumping ahead, OSN History. Yeah, I can go into kind of the background on how that works roughly, because I don't really know, but it reads change sets based on the hashtag that you put in. So what we were able to do is use it to track the number of contributors to our specific projects in the tasking manager. And in theory, this is an ongoing project. We're I guess, semi-officially launching it today. Anybody who contributes, if you were to go on and contribute right now, your name would appear in the user list ranked by number of contributions. Whether or not we want to gamify this and have a shout out to someone who contributes the most edits, or to the top 5 people who contribute the most edits, or whether or not we want to have a mapathon where at the end of the day the biggest contributors get a GPS device or whatever. So yeah, OSN History is key. Next slide. Tasking Manager, also key, obviously. One thing that we were playing around with that I think is really interesting was using the Tasking Manager's new API to bring some of the Tasking Manager functionality into the microsite that we were building. And it was actually remarkably easy, because there is an API, to overlay a tasking grid to allow users to choose tasks within the microsite, not having to first go through the tasking manager. There are a lot of little issues with this, having to do with user experience, UX workflows, and yeah, a couple issues with the API, because it's brand new and it's only partially exposed. And I can go into those in detail if anyone wants to talk about it. But I think this is a great model because it allows you to build the tasking manager directly into the workflow that you're building around your contributor base, and have a much more kind of targeted engagement. Next slide. ID. Also, ID just, I guess this fall, came out with a great release of custom functionality. You can now customize the minimum zoom level. You can customize presets, and you can customize the imagery that displays in the imagery bar. That's all huge. And actually, even though ID is a really serious app, we were able to redeploy it without too much trouble. And seriously, like, I've only been programming for a little bit, so I'm no master at this, and it wasn't particularly hard. I can talk about redeploying ID, also redeploying Tasking Manager if anyone's curious. But yeah, writing your own custom presets. Right now, it's totally possible to start editing in this instance of ID, and the only thing you're going to be able to edit are logging roads and plantation roads. So when you start looking up road, it's not going to give you primary road, secondary road, track, et cetera, unless that's something that we wanted to expose to our user. Nor is it going to give you every single point. And there's a reason that ID needs to hit this, again, like 85, 95% browser-based editing use case. But in this, what we're trying to do here is limit it to only the 5–10% use case of specifically mapping logging roads and plantation roads. Also, because these are spread out over really sparsely populated areas, changing the, editing all of this stuff at zoom level 16, which makes a lot of sense in a dense urban area, makes no sense in the jungle. So that was key as well. And yeah, as I said, imagery, we have 14 years of imagery that I can go into. Also, it's really interesting stuff that UMD has been, University of Maryland has been working on. Tomas was kind of key to doing some of our imagery analysis. But imagine having to edit this in ID, and every time you wanted to change the imagery base layer, you would have to put in the, the tile URL template into the little custom form. And then try, that alone would be a pain in the ass. Try explaining that to someone who has no idea what a tile set is, much less a tile URL template. It wouldn't work. So this was key. These developments with ID were really key to what we were doing. Next slide. Also, what's a map without a mapathon? We had one kind of little test mapathon. We call it our beta launch, but I think this might be our beta launch now. So we had one 2 weeks ago. We have a real, or more real, less beta mapathon in Kinshasa coming up in a couple weeks. I think is it the 20th? There we are, 22nd. Yeah, and then there's another one in UCLA that is the 30th, and hopefully there will be more. So yeah, great. This is so much for responsive. The website is crowdcover.github.io/logging-roads, and that would be easier to remember if you could see it. Sorry. I don't know. We'll tweet out the link, I guess. Soon it will be loggingroads.org. If anyone knows how DNS works, please give me a hand. I tried really hard last night and I still couldn't figure it out. And yeah, tweet us at OSN Logging Roads. I think that's it. Is there another slide? Here we are. So Q&A or, right? I think we have time. I don't know what we're doing. Tomas, do you want to come up as well and answer?
You're only 15 minutes late.
Only only 15 minutes late. That's
we started
like ahead of the game, generally speaking, right? Yeah, fine, great.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's great. Actually, I think one of the objectives why I'm here actually. Later I'm going to present the vaccination tracking system which Samuel and eHealth are working on as well. And we have the exact same issue, and one of the main objectives we are here is to see how we can move from proprietary software, which has been used, into OSM, and potentially, hopefully, be able to use OSM to manage this huge volume of data that we have in the database now for northern states of Nigeria. And so, I had actually, my last slide on this presentation is like, I had lots of questions which you just raised, and you know, how do you import, and you know, how do you, if there is existing data, how do you identify duplicates and this kind of thing? And I was wondering if there was like a group which is working around how to move from a proprietary database into an OpenStreet data management method, you know, so that we can sort of, I'm not really into this community, I'm pretty new into this, and it's pretty hard. There is a lot of things, and it's really hard to catch up in all this, so I was wondering if there was like a group which we could, you know, help us do this move.
Yeah. First off, let's sit down after this. I'd love to, kind of talk through what we did. I can show you. I think, I mean, everything that we've done is online on GitHub, so we can share, repos. I can show you kind of how we approached it. As far as specific groups, I know there's a switch to OSM is one thing that comes to mind. Do you have any other thoughts on specific like roadmaps?
No, like we don't have a roadmap yet. Like it's like a steep learning curve for us too. So like we have teams in all the different countries. Like in 6 countries, we have partners who also work on the same issues. So like now, since we have this tool available, we're going to start improvising and see like how this works best and how we can organize ourselves around these data sets. But like it's like still a long way to go, like to actually like figure out how we want to do, how we're going to manage this over the long run. Like this is the beginning right now. Like we just launched it today, right before like it was just like more like us testing it. We also have to see like if, like especially like since we have our team in the African countries where internet bandwidth is not really like a strong suit. Like we also have to see if we can actually deploy these tools in a server environment and like have people edit online. We haven't tested this fully, so the Mapathon next in 3 weeks in Kinshasa will also show like if this is actually our vision is actually possible at this point in time.
So does anyone else have any suggestions on like
You guys were going to organize I'm putting this on you now, but I thought you guys were going to organize a birds of feather state of the map around exactly this kind of community.
Exactly. And I know, I know there must be other like resources online that kind of in a more holistic way talk about switching from non-OSM to OSM. If anyone has anything comes to mind, just shout out or. But let's talk afterwards, I guess.
Other questions?
Just one, so do you have physical presence with your offices in Kinshasa or in Congo? Where are you in which town are you?
Moabi and WI are both in Kinshasa,
okay.
And then we have partners like in DRC we partner with WCS, WWF, CI, AWS, Jekyll, and they're actually sitting in all the different protected areas and like across the entire country. Same thing for Congo Brazzaville, and then we have offices in Libreville, in Gabon, in Equatorial Guinea, in Cameroon, and in Central African Republic. We now opened an office in Liberia, and we're planning to open an office also in Madagascar for our forest work in Africa. So we're pretty widespread, but like our main focus is the Congo Basin.
You mentioned before about data model, specifically for the type of data that you collect, and I'm particularly interested in the topic of data models or side data models to the standard or to the core data model in OpenStreetMap. And I was wondering how you dealt with creating a separate data model for specific things that you might be tracking, and how are you interfacing with the OpenStreetMap community for adding like new tags, new type of information that is not normally collected.
Yeah. So like I guess logging roads is not like the typical feature you normally map with OpenStreetMap, and also the definition of logging road is pretty vague. So like, what is a logging road, right? Normally it's like should be like linked to an activity, and you don't always see the activity like on a satellite image. Yeah, like you can just assume that this is a logging road. There's like it just ends somewhere. Like it goes in the forest and it ends in the forest. It doesn't lead anywhere, right? And like normally like you see like a specific pattern, there's fishbone patterns, and like really like encroaching in all upon all different areas. So we engaged like strongly with the OSN community. Like we had Raphael here who helped us a lot, like figuring out like which tags we should use. So like one of the main our main concerns was like to timestamp the image, the roads, because we don't want to just know like if there's a road, but we also want to know like when it was created and if it's still active or not. So because often like these roads, like they open up the roads and then after a couple of years they abandon them. So actually like after some point in time you don't see the road anymore because the canopy is closing up, but the road is still there underneath, and that might be used not for logging anymore, but then like for like as footpaths, motorbikes. So people might still using it, but we can't see that there's actually something physically present on the ground. So we're using the start date and end date tags and abandon tags too. We have right now this 15 years of data where we can actually like go back in time and check like when the road first showed up and like when it started, like when we couldn't see it anymore on the images, and we assign these tags to the road.
And so you actually remove the feature from the database? You delete that road?
No, we just we keep it and then we say abandon, and then we have an end date, but we don't delete it. So it's still in the database, but it says this is an abandoned road and it was abandoned at this date.
But if there's new trees, if it's covered by new vegetation, it should be deleted at that point. Like a house and it's destroyed and then rebuilt.
No, like if you're in the forest, even like if the road is not active, you can still see it. Like you have like condensed soil. So, like it's actually still a road. Like maybe there's like some hills, but there won't be trees. The trees like next to it will cover it up, so you don't see it on the image. But remote sensing is not everything, right? So like there's something below the canopy which is not visible, and like the soil will like stay compressed like for the next 100 years.
Yeah.
So like it won't, like there were trucks going on this road, so like they won't like just like loosen up again. Like they stay there, right? And like as soon as like companies want to go back into these areas, they just need to like clear up the roads. They don't have to fell trees anymore.
Yeah, I was just trying to make the link to some of the damage assessment that we're trying to do for the earthquake, and how things change and then they're deleted from the map and then they might come back. And so I was trying to understand it.
Like we want to use this abandoned tag
to
say, okay, like this road is abandoned. It's not, maybe right now not visible, but it's still there, right?
I can add, because the tagging system basically is that you have to put the date of every track using the imagery that we have from 2000 to 2013, I think. So you will use the start date, comparing all this imagery. So you will put the start date, for example, 2003 for this segment and 2004 for this other segment. But when you have one track that is already abandoned, you will use the abandon tag that starts with abandon.
Right.
So it won't be rendered by most of the renders, but it will be data that you will have there. So for example, abandon tag equal to forestry, something like that. But then also you will have abandon date. So the date it was abandoned. And if you, of course, if you go there and you see that this is not anymore a track, but it's a pedestrian road or something like that, you can put highway, footway or something. Okay. At the same time that you have abandoned. This is something that was discussed in the in the community for a long time.
So we started
like
a wiki, like an import wiki and a mailing list, where we kind of were presenting our model, and like had like some discussions around it, and like then like this led like into the model we want to apply right now. Other questions? Great. So thank you for attending.
Yeah. If you want to check out, the repo, or I guess it's a set of repos under the crowd cover organization. If you have questions, if you have feedback, reach out formally or informally. What works, but what doesn't work. If there's something that looks like it should be done a different way, tell us, because we're building this as we go. So. And also, huge thank you to Raphael. Raphael's been pretty key on doing a lot of the data munging. And yeah, getting all of this data into OSM in the first place. So thank you, Raphael. Great. Thank you.